I want to talk about this massive challenge that's facing renters and try and get into the sort of the who, why and wherefores of how it's happening. We're going to hear from our property expert, Russel Quirk. Russell, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Look, we've learnt today that rents are only going to go in one direction. What's driving that? Is it COVID? Is it mortgage rates? What's been the driver of it?
Well, let's be clear, rents only ever go up, ever since people started renting properties, which is, I'm sure, many hundreds of years ago, rents only go up. I think what we've seen in recent months is that the problem of rent growth has been further accentuated by a number of factors. So, rents are increasing, have been increasing actually faster than wages up until recently, although the latest numbers from the ONS show that rent increases are something like 5% per annum. Of course, wage growth is now a little bit higher than that. And there are a couple of reasons. And look, one is the supply side of the debate, and the other reason is the demand side. So on the demand side, of course, we've now got people that can't or won't or don't want to buy a property because, A, there are tensions within the property market. There's uncertainty, and B, of course, their interest rates are substantially higher now. Mortgage rates are substantially higher than they were. So as a consequence, look, you have two choices, I suppose. You either stay with parents if you're in a position to be able to do so, or you rent, which is why that demand has increased. And that is one of the two factors that has dictated that rents have gone up as much as they have. The other problem, of course, is one of supply. And if you have a diluting of supply and at the same time an increase in demand, well, I'm afraid that only leads to one thing, and that's an increase in the rental value of those properties. So supply is a big, big problem because, of course, if we're not building enough homes, and look, Jake, no disrespect to you as a Conservative MP, you should know all about this because, of course, it's your party that has been in power.
It's on our watch, you're right.
It is, and your party, and in fairness, successive governments previously that have not built enough homes. And if we don't build enough homes for sale, that also means we don't have enough homes to rent. There's not enough build to rent. There's not enough social housing. So we have a throttling of housing supply, which actually is about to get worse because the property market, again, faces a lot of uncertainty. And as a consequence of that, the big house builders, the big developers that really control most of the supply of new homes have frankly decided that because the market is a little more treacherous than normal and they're not going to get the prices perhaps that they would have achieved a year ago, they're simply not now building. So this problem actually is going to get even worse, as I guess you alluded to in your preamble. What do we do? Well, it's not a we question, Jake, really. It's a question of what governments are going to do, what governments will do that they've failed to do in recent years and decades. The fact that actually in 1968, as an example, we built 40% more homes than we do now, yet our population is substantially bigger. It's a problem. And again, with no disrespect to you, Jake, that I need to ask you the question, Frank.
Well, Russell, before we get on to you asking me a question, let me ask you this, because I think this is interesting. Just 2 points that I want to push you on, and then I will attempt to answer your question. I'll pick up the gauntlet. But the first one is, look, how the average rent we've learnt today is now a staggering £1,243 per month. The first question is, how does that compare to a mortgage? So if people could make that leap, get onto the property ladder, and we'll talk about with Ben from Generation Rent in a moment why that's so difficult. If they could make that leap, is getting a mortgage, see this mortgage bomb that's gone off, is that cheaper now than renting, or are they about the same, or is it much more expensive to buy?
It's always been a fine line between, what is better value. But I think property ownership normally wins on the basis that over a period of time, of course, we end up with appreciation. So even though house prices are dropping very slightly now, so the latest numbers from Halifax, Nationwide, etc., is that house prices are down about 3.5% year on year. But generally, we all accept that over a long period of time, decades, house prices increase. So therefore, if you're thinking of your property as an investment as well as a home, and it's questionable actually whether you should do that, but if you do, then of course it's better to buy, because in the long term you will see capital appreciation. The problem now, of course, is the uncertainty of where interest rates are going to go. If they continue to be put up by the Independent Bank of England, that seems to be, frankly, out of control.
Look, I personally think you're right. I think we've reached the end of monetary response to inflation. I certainly don't think we're going to go. Look, another question I just wanted to put to you is that people like the National Landlords Association talk about the loss of tax relief on the mortgage payments by landlords. I think actually being a buy-to-let landlord is the only business in the UK where you get charged on your turnover rather than your profit. They have talked about landlords in record numbers leaving the buy-to-let market, creating this crunch in numbers, putting up the rents. Do you think that government policy, has played a big part in this rent increase we're seeing?
Yeah, I do. The CEO of the NRLA, the National Residential Landlords Association, Ben Beadle, has done a fantastic job of trying to go into bat for landlords in recent years because, again, I sound like a government basher here, but, it's governments that make policies and decide to do things or not do them. So, that's where the responsibility lies. The government in recent years has really bashed landlords. They've taken away mortgage tax relief at high rate. They've penalised landlords with a CGT, a capital gains tax regime that is different to any other asset, which means that those landlords are penalised. Section 21 coming, the Rental Reform Act, which again, government keeps promising but doesn't quite materialise, means that you won't be able to get rid of a tenant, at the end of the tenancy period. So, we shouldn't be surprised.
They're leaving the market.
Landlords are leaving the market to in summary, at the rate of about 70,000 landlords every year.
Russell, thanks for that. So those policies designed by the government to help renters, we've just heard from Russell, are part of the problem. And to deal with the other big question is, how do we build more houses? Because the only way we're going to create more houses to rent or to buy is to build more.